Hi, folks. Okay. One thing I understand, and I understand that it might come across in the wrong way, but I'm only being honest about the situation, is that when I look at things like John 17, it comes across as insane that people can't see it. It does, and it just does. It comes across as insane that people just can't see it. Because it's bloody obvious. It's there. It's just obvious. But again, I understand that until very recently, I never saw it. It never clicked. The problem is that once it clicked, it became that obvious. And once it became that obvious, yeah, I almost forget that I never saw it until recently. And that's not intentional. That's just because it's so blinking obvious. It seems ridiculous to me that I didn't see it, because obviously I didn't. But again, it can come across to people that I'm saying I always saw it, which would not be true. But it can easily come across in that way. Well, because again, if you're acting like it's the most ridiculous blinking thing that people don't see it, which is the way I feel. Truly, it's the way I feel. It's the most ridiculous thing that people don't see it. But again, as I say, I don't understand when the remit became that you have to make everything about the sun, but whenever that happened. And again, I've said all along, well, again, not really. I've said more recently, that's more honest. I've said more recently that there are major problems with the Word of God that we have. So that idea may have come from the writings of Paul and Peter. That we have to make everything about the Son, because to them, in a way, they had to. They were the early church. They were church building. So everything to them had to be about the Son of God. Everything to them. Especially as they didn't have the Gospels. They didn't have the writings that we have. So they couldn't see that the Son of God was making it all about the Father. And actually, to a certain degree, when you're building a church and the church is going from you're all sinners and you will fall short of God to actually sin is dealt with now and you no longer fall short of God, then of course, speaking about the one that made that possible, well, one of them that made it possible, the one that's most obvious to the understanding, which was the Son at that time, that would make sense. But the problem is, once you get the Gospels, it makes no sense. It doesn't. It makes zero sense. When we know that the Son of God said you're supposed to pray to the Father, not to him, then why people are praying to him, it can only be Peter or Paul and their writings that are encouraging people to do that. Right? So, as I say, the problem is, I don't believe that the letters to the churches were supposed to be what we have now. And but as I say, it would not surprise me at all if they get it all from that. They get it all from the writings. But again, the problem is people, I don't blame Peter or Paul for that in any way, shape or form, because it's not their fault. They were doing the job that they were supposed to be doing. And I don't believe it was God's intention for those letters to the churches to be part of what we have. I don't. Yeah. I believe it was part of what was desired in order to lead people away. Because it's very, very clever. Very, very clever. Yeah. Well, it is quite genius of the devil if that is the case, because obviously, yeah, these people who are creating the original church are speaking to people in a certain way for the certain purpose. And what the devil does, he says, but if we take these letters and we make these letters the new covenant, then people will think that's the way it should always be done. But why? Because people are sheep, and sheep are blinking stupid. So therefore, yeah, people will just think that that's the way it should be done. Bing bang, bing bang, bing bang, bing bang, boo. We've got the church in a direction that it should never be in. There you go. Job done. Not difficult. Give us a new covenant, writings and scriptures that are far more than what we should have had, and what we have was perfect for a time because they were writing to the churches at the time about the issues that they were going through, where most of them were coming from either no understanding to that, or were coming from a understanding of Judaism into this new covenant belief system. And so therefore, yeah, they had a job to do, but yeah, I don't know where it came from, but yeah, maybe that's something I need to look into. Maybe I need to do some homework on that and scour through. The problem is, if I'm looking for it, I'm not going to find it. I'm just going to have to trust that God will lead me to it if I'm supposed to find it. And that will be the case. If I'm supposed to find it, I will. And I'm not going to try and look, because that's me doing it, not God. So, yeah, that's probably a better idea. Just let God deal with it in his way, rather than me trying to force the issue, because that won't work. Yeah, well, again, you can't see things because you want to. Not with stuff like this. You can't see it because you want to. You can see it when you're ready to see it. And as I say, all about seeing that the Son was making it about the Father, until we're ready to see it, we can't. That's the reality. So again, it's what you're putting. Well, Archie, one of the leaders of the Vineyard Church in Elgin, he said that he wanted direction, as in to be led by God. And I think I may. I told him the truth about that. I said, look, if you want to be led by God, then what you've got to do is you've got to understand what you're being led by right now, and you've got to put those things aside, and you've got to, every minute of every day, decide to be led by God and not by those things. You've got to keep reminding yourself and keep doing that. When those things come back in your head, you say, no. But the problem is, all your support that you have right now, you have because you were doing things in a way that they liked. Once you start doing things according to God, all of that is going to disappear. And not just disappear, you'll have people saying those wonderful lines that the words are supposed to be encouraging, but the way they say it won't be. After all these years, why now? Why are you now doing things, or trying to do things according to God? Yeah, that's not a bad statement, because it's saying that you're trying to do things according to God. And it could be seen as, why weren't you trying earlier? But actually, what it is saying is, why are you doing this? You're mucking things up. Things were going okay as they were. And he's going to get that from the people closest to him. And yeah. Well, I said, if he wants that, I'll ask God to bring it to him. To bring him to that point where he can have that. And yeah. He hasn't got back to me and said that he wants it. So I don't blame him. Honestly, I don't blame him. that's something you're going to think a bit more seriously about as to whether you want it, because, yeah, to ask for something that basically turns most of your support system completely against you and will actually have him removed from the leadership of that church as well. Oh, yeah, very quickly. If he starts to try and do things according to God and be led by God, rather than by all the things he's been led by in the past, yep, people will start talking of him as if he's insane. Yeah. So, yeah. I get how people don't necessarily want that. So there you go. I wish you well. Be blessed, be a blessing, and have a fantastic week. And yeah, build your relationship with God. Focus on that. Take care.